higher interest rates and geopolitics, higher interest rates and the lingering effects of the war in the coronavirus pandemic have done little to slow down the global economy. That's according to the International Monetary Fund. The fund's new forecast saw global growth of 3.2% this year and next. The IMF also foresees a steady but slow growth in sub-Saharan Africa, 3.4% last year to 3.8% this year. Nigeria's economy is expected to expand 3.3% in the current year. That's an upgrade from 3% last year. Here is IMF Chief Economist Pierre-Olivier Gorinches briefing the media on this earlier today in Washington, D.C.
The economy continues to display remarkable resilience, with growth holding steady and inflation declining. But many challenges still lie ahead. Global growth was 3.2% in 2023 and is expected to remain at that level both in 2024 and 2025. This represents a 0.3 percentage point upgrade from our October projections for 2024, with stronger activity than expected in the US, China, and other large emerging markets, but weaker activity in the euro area. Inflation continues to come down. Median inflation will decline from 4% at the end of last year to 2.8% by the end of this year and 2.4% at the end of 2025. And most indicators continue to point to a soft landing. Now, resilient growth and rapid disinflation are consistent with favorable supply developments, including the fading of energy price shocks and a striking rebound in labor supply, supported by strong immigration in many advanced economies. We also project less economic scarring from the crisis of the past 4 years, although estimates vary across countries. The US economy has already surged past its pre-pandemic trend, but we now estimate there will be more scarring for low-income developing countries, many of which are still struggling to turn the page from the pandemic and cost of living crisis. Risks are now broadly balanced. On the downside, new price spikes from geopolitical tensions, persistent core inflation, or a disruptive turn towards fiscal adjustment could slow activity. On the upside, faster disinflation or timely structural reforms that boost productivity could support activity. Insufficient action on the fiscal front could also stimulate growth, although this could force a more costly adjustment later on. Inflation trends are encouraging, but we are not there yet. Somewhat worryingly, progress towards inflation targets has stalled since the beginning of the year in some countries. This could be a temporary setback, but there are reasons to remain vigilant. Oil prices have been rising, in part due to geopolitical tensions, and services inflation remains stubbornly high in many countries. Further trade restrictions could also push up goods inflation. Bringing inflation back to target should remain the priority. There are stark divergences also between countries that call for careful calibration of monetary policy. The strong recent performance of the United States reflects robust productivity growth and growth in labor supply, but also strong demand pressures that could add to inflation. This calls for a cautious and gradual approach to easing by the Federal Reserve. By contrast, growth in the euro area will rebound this year, but from very low levels. Unlike in the United States, there is little evidence of a hot economy, and the European Central Bank will need to carefully calibrate the pivot towards monetary easing. China's economy remains affected by the downturn in its property sector. Domestic demand will remain lackluster unless strong measures address the root cause, and monetary policy can afford to be more accommodative. Going forward, policymakers should prioritize measures that help preserve or even enhance the resilience of the global economy. A key priority is to rebuild fiscal buffers, especially in an environment with high real interest rates, modest growth, and elevated debts. Unfortunately, planned fiscal adjustments are often insufficient and could be derailed further given the record number of elections this year. In the United States, the fiscal stance is out of line with long-term fiscal sustainability. This raises short-term risks to the disinflation process, as well as longer-term fiscal and financial stability risks for the global economy. Fiscal consolidations are never easy, but it is best not to wait until markets dictate their conditions. Credible fiscal consolidations can help lower funding costs, improve fiscal headroom, and financial stability. The key is to start early, gradually, and credibly. This will also pave the way for further monetary policy easing to support activity. The second priority is to reverse the decline in medium-term growth for low-income countries. Structural reforms should promote domestic and foreign investment and increase fiscal revenues. This will help lower borrowing costs and reduce funding needs. These countries must also improve the human capital of their large young populations, especially as the rest of the world is aging rapidly. Artificial intelligence also gives hope for boosting productivity. It may do so, but the potential for serious disruptions in labor and financial markets is high, and the right infrastructure and regulations are needed. Third, global growth prospects are also harmed by rising geo-economic fragmentation. Trade linkages are already changing. Some economies could benefit from the reconfiguration of global supply chains, but the net effect may still be a loss of efficiency, making the global economy less, not more resilient. And the broader damage is to global cooperation. A great achievement of the past few years has been the strengthening of monetary, fiscal, and financial policy frameworks, especially for emerging market economies. This has helped make the global financial system more resilient and avoid a permanent resurgence of inflation. Going forward, it is essential to preserve these improvements, and that includes protecting the hard-won independence of central banks. Lastly, the green transition requires major investments. Cutting emissions is compatible with growth, but emissions are still rising, so more needs to be done and done quickly. This will require technology transfers by other advanced economies and China to other emerging and developing economies, as well as substantial private and public financing. On these questions, as well as on many others, multilateral frameworks and cooperation remain essential for progress.